as you were. I'd like to welcome you all to the 2020 annual meeting of the Great Harbor Yacht Club. I'm pleased to let you know that we hold 128 proxies. A quorum is therefore present for the conduct of all business. And I'd like to start our meeting by asking for a motion to waive the reading of the minutes of the 2019 meeting and to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'd like to second.
I vote the proxies and the minutes are unanimously approved. Thank you. You'll see before you the agenda for our meeting, which will follow along, hopefully in an hour or so, perhaps more. We're going to start with the Commodore's remarks. I'd like to tell you a sea saga. Let's call it a journey to the other side, a tale none of us could have imagined last summer. It's the story of your board's journey from the old world, let's call it pre-COVID land, through the mare incognitum, the unknown sea, guided throughout by some basic first principles, making landfall in the new world, let's call it terra firma, in July. The story begins. Let's go back to early March and the weather in the port. It is pretty ugly. The Dow is down 35%. Hospitalizations in New York City are soaring. People are whispering the D word, and the Northeast is under stay-at-home orders. So we've got to make some preparations to sail, or more specifically, we need to consider, do we open the club? A very real question back in March for us. Should we open? And if we open, when should we open? We understand that some of the things are within our control, but much more really wasn't. The spread of the viruses, governmental mandates, and even if we do open, and as we heard from one of our past Commodores on a call, what assurances do we have that our members will even come? So the real challenge that we faced early on was, how do we begin to match services to an unknown demand? And what we tried to do at the outset was to establish a timeline as to the opening of the club. This ship does not turn on a dime. So we needed to know what we needed to decide and when. The good news is that we now have an operating manual for the opening of the club. Next slide. Early days were pretty rough. Early in March, we had to, in essence, jettison our H-2B visa staff. This did result in a savings of $250,000. Were we to take them on in March, we would have been committed to take them from mid-May all the way through to October at full salary. And beyond that, at the end of that period, if they were not able to go back to their clubs in Florida, the club would have been obligated, Great Harbor would have been obligated to send them back to their countries of origin, if indeed we could. If not, they were ours. It wasn't so difficult. We did terminate the H-2B visa staffs. Almost, and not shortly thereafter, probably a week or so thereafter, our J1 processor, Irish J1 visa processor, went bankrupt. And with that, we lost our Irish sailing staff and more food and beverage staff. We also early on recognized that social distancing was going to be with us throughout the summer. And that made an event business impossible. So by mid-March, we had lost our H-2B staff, our Irish sailing staff, and $1 million of banquet revenues. We also knew that we needed to comply with protocols for the staffing when we did get staff. And we knew that to comply with the staffing of those protocols would result in the loss of approximately 70% of our housing capacity. Our staffing would be limited for the summer. Into the bargain, we had an ever-changing sea of evolving state and local mandates. So what did we really set out to do? The goal was really to operate the club in a responsible manner without endangering the health and well-being of members and staff, our primary objective. We were going to be guided and continue to be guided by first principles. Your board continues to believe that we need to act in the long-term best interests of the club, preserving at the same time all that is unique and so very special about Great Harbor. We were going to avoid betting the ranch for limited short-term gain, and we were going to do our utmost to preserve and protect the hard-earned financial strength of the club. So what we're going to do, we were going to be guided by best practices of the CDC and the dictates of state and local law. That, however, was a bit of a moving target. At one point, as some of you will recall, out-of-staters were requested to quarantine. At other times, they were then required to quarantine. When Massachusetts finally announced its reopening, it was going to reopen in stages. Initially, for example, only single households were permitted in boats. Then people with mass, 3 people in mass were permitted in boats. And while 6 feet of social distancing was okay in the dining room, in July, we were surprised to learn that 14 feet of social distancing would be required in our gym. This required an enormous amount of flexibility and change from your dedicated management team. Next slide. So what did we do to get our staffing? Thanks to the really hard work of Stephen and Christian and Sarah Story, we determined that our staffing would come from Boston, Nantucket, and the University of Massachusetts. We still understood that we were going to have to quarantine off-island workers when they came for 14 days. We were also going to require only 1 person per room with their own individual own bathroom. Separately, we had to isolate, we had to devote one of our houses to an isolation house in the event we did in fact have a case. Net, at the end of the day, we are operating this summer at 40% of our staffing levels as compared to 2019. And that was and remains a definite constraint on what we can and could not do. Early on, we determined that our food and beverage would be outdoor service. There was just too much risk. We could read about it in all the papers of Hong Kong and elsewhere, of people contracting disease through the circulation of air conditioning indoors. So your board determined early on we would have outdoor dining with a robust takeaway service. And that wasn't so bad, actually. In fact, we thought it was pretty good because it allowed us to take advantage of one of the principal assets of the club, namely our spectacular views on the harbor. So we thought that we could deliver a really first-class product, and ultimately we thought, and I do believe, there was no finer or safer place to eat on the island than our tent this summer on the harbor. Activities. We determined early on that we would start out slow. We needed to execute on what we set our mind to, and we would expand as Massachusetts allowed us to expand. It seemed to have worked, and we quickly pivoted to what I consider a near full operation. Our tennis and swim center recorded record numbers of private lessons, in addition to clinics and full-on singles and double play. We opened our family pool and our lap pool with reservations, and this is a really important and unexpected point that came across. We did not plan this, but it happened. We sold a record number of new tennis memberships this summer, 7 in total. Normally, we'd be lucky if we sold 1 a summer. This summer, we sold 7. The effect of that was to produce significant revenues to the club, and equally important, each one of those memberships relieved the club of a long-term liability to a prior member. The net of which is the sale of those 7 tennis memberships reduced our long-term liabilities by $250,000, something nobody would have imagined at the beginning of the summer. As to sailing, we quickly spun up our programs to provide for a vibrant junior program, adult clinics, lessons for adults and junior, open sailing on all of our boats, and limited racing as permitted. In the sports barn, we opened our sports barn when phase 3 of the plans allowed us to do so. The 14 feet of social distancing would not accommodate indoor yoga and exercise, so we did it on the decks, and I think it was enjoyed by all. We even had personal training. In fishing, Corey was on board for the summer, providing private charters, advice for all of our members, and we had a year-long, summer-long fishing tournament, which I think was enjoyed by all. Hats off to Mariana for a spectacular social program, virtual though it was. Book clubs, cooking demonstration, wine and cheese evenings, boat barns in a box, interviews with Cheryl, and more. The proverbial bottom line of all of this: as we speak, we project a net operating loss of the club of $125,000. That was not obviously what we had budgeted a year ago, but compares favorably, frankly, to other years under full operation. More importantly, and in my mind, equally impressive, in times where the markets are down 35% and all the rest, and hats off to our membership committee, we still managed to sell 10 new regular memberships at $400,000 each, which was exactly what we planned to do. And in addition to those 10 memberships, which we did sell, there are 2 or 3 more in the pipe. To be able to sell 10 memberships, 3 in the pipe, in this environment, I think speaks to the vibrancy of the club and of the dedication of the membership committee. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we sold 7 new tennis memberships at $60,000 each, producing again revenues to the club, relieving us of some long-term liabilities, and equally important, some of those members have in fact and will continue to become full members of the Yacht Club. In terms of our initial promises and what we set out to do, we did all this without touching 1 penny of our $2 million of contingency reserves. I consider this a financial success. Next slide. So how was the summer at Great Harbor Yacht Club? Let's see. The journey may not have been as swift as some would have liked. We may have taken an additional tack or 2 to avoid a perilous lee shore. The communications from the bridge may not have been to the liking of all, but, and I have a phrase in law, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. And I would like to thank, as we'll shortly see, I would like to thank your board, our committees, and most of all, our management team, who worked countless hours in bring weekends, Sundays, all through the fall, all through the early spring. Countless hours in bringing the Great Harbor Yacht Club ship through a perilous and uncharted sea to terra firma. And I'd like to also thank Roger and others for these slides of our summer. At the end of the day, all of you can judge how successful the summer is. But as I said, I think the thing speaks for itself.
It is my pleasure to be able to report on the activities. There was a time in March and April when the reality of COVID sunk in and we weren't sure that even minimal programming would be possible. Truth be told, for a week or so, we wondered if the club would even open. What a difference a few months makes, especially when you have a team that is committed to making lemonade out of lemons. As Elliot noted, huge thanks are due to our extraordinary board and our truly exceptional staff. As a point of privilege, I would like to thank our Commodore, who put countless hours into making sure this summer was the best and safest that it could possibly be. I can't think of a more capable leader to have the helm at this unprecedented time. Against all odds, it has been a great summer. Membership. The amazing Megan Maltby and talented, even debonair, Phil Nardoni are to be commended for staying nimble. Once COVID struck, spring interviews all had to be done online, and the buzz prevailed. There are still people out there, as Elliot said, who are interested in joining the club, and we'll get more details on that in the report. The good news is the club is thriving and there is significant interest. Let's look at the stats. We have 9 new families actually who have joined and 1 who is 3 to 4 days away in the posting period from becoming our 10th family. We have 3 more, as Elliot said, who are in the pipeline. There has been some interest that potentially others will be interested in joining either by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. As always, our members continue to be our best ombudsman. The $500 credit continues for members who serve to sponsor a new member. The resignation list stands at 20. You'll recall several years ago, it was much higher than that, in the 60s, and the wait list was 7 years. Now it's down to 1.5 years to 2 years to recoup your investment, and for some, even increase their investment. 2 members thus far have taken advantage of the senior membership that allows your membership to pass to the next generation. Marketing is part of the marketing and membership committee purview. I think many of you, in fact 525 of you, signed up for the app, the mobile app. If you haven't done so, Megan and Duncan can walk you through it, but I could do it, so I'm pretty sure anybody can do it. Weekly emails have gone out to keep members apprised of what's going on. You also have the ability to opt in to see what your favorite parts of the club are doing with group-specific emails. Part of the communication process this year was signage, and it was so important, and we were mandated to have signage. It was required for public health, and we followed it to the letter. Food and beverage. It is entirely possible that Christian and Rhonda McDonald, the food and beverage chair, talked every day, and maybe sometimes every hour, during the planning and beyond. Andre and Nico fed us one great meal after another. So here are the stats. We served 1,120 glasses of wine this season. Our club likes to drink. 727 bottles of wine have been sold, a new record at new record low prices. Our chefs have seared 480 halibut fillets for our enjoyment. We've sold 189 fish tacos and 156 lobster rolls curbside, making those 2 takeout favorites. We have served, I think this is an incredible number, 1,678 curbside orders, and 2,710 members have enjoyed meals under the tent. The menus expanded throughout the season, first starting with an all-day menu, developing into a full lunch and full dinner menus, both available under the tent and curbside. Social committees. Well, it's hard to be social when you can't be social. But Mariana Brewster, the chair of the social committee, along with Sarah Story, our events director, did a magnificent job. They came up with Taco Tuesday, served 85 taco kits, meaning 340 members and their families have enjoyed Taco Tuesday festivities. One new member, Chris Casaza, wrote in a note full of praise. Taco Tuesdays were our kids' favorite night of the week. Book club was another a great success. The leaders of that group picked fabulous books to read. It was a delight for all who participated. Brick's Wine Shop, and many of you participated in this, brought a whole new meaning to drinking wine at home. We hosted 5 virtual wine and cheese tastings that have taken us all over the world. I'd like to thank you for welcoming GHYC into your home this year on behalf of the Social Committee. Truth be told, though, we can't wait to get back and welcome you back to the club next year. Sports Barn. As Elliot noted, Sports Barn was looking dicey for a while. But Josh Howard and Stephen Crease saw to it that we were able to open and stayed nimble so that we could open. Members continue to make health and wellness a priority. Sports Barn opened on July 7th when Phase 3, Part 2, was allowed by the Commonwealth. We've had 173 members check in for the gym and a total of 1,064 visits since we opened. 22 members took personal training lessons. We offered outdoor fitness classes, and yoga, of course, was once again a huge success. Prohibitions of competitions meant that this year we would not be able to have awards. And this was a disappointment for us all, but I think we saw from the photographs at the end of Elliot's report that savoring many happy hours and activities both outdoors and in the gym was much more than many of us thought we would ever have. For tennis and swim, David Cheever, who is chair, and John Leerink brought the best out of our tennis players and marked an extremely successful season. In 65 days, we have taught close to 1,100 private lessons for adults and children. Through August 24th, we have generated $112,000 in private lessons compared to $107,000 during the same period last year. We were able to pivot early and offer adult tennis clinics to both men and women, generating $28,000 in 7 weeks and serving over 710 participants. We opened the tennis court 8 days earlier than scheduled. We opened the family pool and squash courts, both of which were expected to stay closed for the entire season. We have generated $10,000 in pro shop revenue that was totally unanticipated because we expected it to be closed. Fishing. Nathaniel Mason, and as Elliot pointed, is the chair, and Corey Gamble stayed on. We couldn't fish off the docks this year, but I can't tell you how many members I saw going out with their rods and tackle to their boats to go fishing. And as we've seen from the photographs, fish of all stripes and colors and sizes were brought to the Great Harbor Dock to be cleaned. Sailing and waterfront. Chair Tracy Weaver and committee and head of Sailing and Waterfront, Emma Hermanic, We're in constant contact with Nantucket Community Sailing and Nantucket Yacht Club, and up to the minute in their awareness of what was going to be allowed by the state. What we did was plan, so if Governor Baker opened up in certain areas, we would be prepared. We've had 22 kids participate in our junior program since the beginning of July. We've seen an increasing attendance each week in adult clinics. Sailboat usage has increased, particularly with single-handed sailing boats. Those lasers are out there. The kids are sailing them. The adults are sailing them. And my friend Susan Wayne has been out there sailing them. Kayaks and paddleboard usage is as strong as always. Members continue to enjoy our outdoor activities. We ran the launch full service from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. with a friendly and attentive staff, and I must say very helpful. I think this may be the best launch staff we have ever had, and the sailing staff too was just excellent. The dinghy dock has gotten more attention than usual in past years because members are making their own way to the docks. Race Week, participants and winners. Before I talk about Race Week participants and winners, I'd like to single out a report about our friend Emma Hermanic. Our talented waterfront director was asked to serve as professional race officer for the Women's Regatta and Opera House Cup. These positions normally are filled by the most talented PROs on the Eastern Seaboard. Emma and her GHYC crew represented the club admirably and received high praise not only from Nantucket Race Week and Opera House Cup leadership, but also from the sailors who applauded her professionalism and organized expertise. She is a real asset to Great Harbor Yacht Club. Race Week participants. Race Week was shortened this year. There were no social activities, and we know that there are usually about 4 social activities a night. But NCS was determined to pull it off, and they did. On August 8th, the One Design Regatta had a number of GHYC participants. Peter Barrett was racing in the Rhodes fleet and got second place. Ashley, India, and Nathaniel Mason also participated in the Rhodes. Illyrian saw Carolyn and Ron Zarella participate, and Sabine and Richard Griffin. August 12th, the Women's Regatta. Emma was also PRO for that, and her support staff was the terrific sailing instructor, Sean Letty. Carolyn Grant, Zarella, Manu Palangin, and Marguerite Davis won first place in the non-spinnaker event. Marguerite did have a mishap. She broke her wrist, but the team still won first place. Sabine Griffin, Ashley Mason, and Amy Baldwin formed another team, and Lucinda Foley, Sue McCullum, and Suzanne Turner were another team. August 13th saw the Youth 420 Regatta. Coach Harrison Page helped Kay Lyon and Vaughn Slatoff, Lily Schnook and India Mason, Peyton McDonald and Maeve Mullen to participate in that regatta. August 14th, the Youth Laser Regatta. Coach Harrison Page was coaching again, and Tyler Hammond, our very own son of Jessica and Josh, got first place in the Laser Regatta, and Kay Lyon was an eager participant. Next slide, please. On August 14th, there was a second regatta, the Model Boat Regatta, and not many people had ever sailed them before. Carolyn Grant, Zarella, was our PRO. Commodore Joe Rip participated. Cynthia Quattrochi and Commodore Ron Zarella participated. I'm not sure that's the order they finished in, but I think it might have been. Finally, on August 14th, the Opti Regatta, Coach Sean Letty again coaching, saw Natty Mason, Mason Fuller, Ogden Oberting, Joss Klein and Alistair Wood competing in the championship flight, and Maggie Wood in the Green Fleet. August 16th, the Opera House Cup proved to be a blustery day. Emma was PRO with support staff Sean Letty, Harrison Page, Samson Puigi, Liz Baker, and Chad Sewell. Wendy Schmidt, aboard her beautiful Santana, was first in the cruising class. Carolyn and Ron Zarella, with Ron's daughters, Catherine and Lily, won the best performance by a family crew on the beautiful Blackfish. Entered but chose not to race, given the conditions, were Tom Giovine in his Myth, Sabine and Richard Giffen on Centauri, Adam Glick, Empress of Blandings, and Charlie Ryan, beautiful Spartan. These older yachts have a difficult time weathering the storm. Finally, we had a festive traditional christening attended by Commodore Norwood Davis, his wife Marguerite, Clay, and her best beau, Jay. We had champagne. We went through the programming that is commanded when you christen a new ship. Many participants, social distancing, stood up on land, and then the Davis family had a maiden voyage above our second Crosby, the Norwood Davis. That ends the activities report, and Grady is going to follow up with the finance report.
Thank you, Cece. I'm Grady Durham. I'm the current chairman of the Finance Committee and the treasurer of the Great Harbor Yacht Club. I am finishing my first year as treasurer, succeeding the great Roger Vandenberg, who served so capably for the previous 4 years, and I had served on the Finance Committee for the 3 years prior to becoming treasurer. The Finance Committee is a very active committee. In fact, committees overall at Great Harbor are well served by our membership, as 86, almost 100 members currently serve on our committees. The Finance Committee consists of Chris Brewster, Bill Camp, Cece Fowler, Phil Hadley, Joe Smolowski, Jeff Parker, and Roy Radding. We meet 4 to 6 times a year. The committee is fortunate to have many Finance Committee veterans on it. I know that helped me very much this year through these tough times. We operate very much in a democratic manner, and all of the club's major financial decisions are discussed by the Finance Committee. So, what happened this year? Well, it was a bit crazy. We had budgeted $3,313,000 in operating income. We came in 70% less than that, with projected income now at $1,150,000. So we came in 70% under our budget. As Elliot commented, food and beverage banqueting alone was almost $1 million. Our fixed expenses didn't vary very much. We budgeted just over $4 million, and we're going to be just under $4 million because obviously they're fixed expenses. Our variable expenses have come in 50% below what they would have been normally. So we had budgeted almost $3.7 million, and we're going to have just under $1.8 million for the variable expenses. So our net operating expenses are going to come in just under $4.6 million, and the budget was projected to be just $4,420,000. Our dues collection came in basically on target at $4,472,000. We budgeted just more than that. So for the year, rather than having a $72,910 operating gain, we're going to come in at a loss of a projected loss, 3/4 of the way through now, of $113,512. So early on, as Elliot alluded, we had to make a lot of decisions to save money. Canceling the H-2B program saved $250,000. We deferred a handful of maintenance and capital projects, put those off If they didn't increase the member experience this year or they weren't vital, we put them off. We had to limit access to certain areas of the club in order to reduce the costs of sanitization. And we had to limit the facilities, which also resulted in a modest utility savings. We had to budget things we never planned on. We had almost $100,000 so far in COVID-related expenses, including a massive amount of hand sanitizer and that beautiful tent that most of you have been in this summer. So in conclusion, the club started the year 2020, January 2020, financially strong. I'm delighted to tell you all that as we near Labor Day 2020, we are remaining in extremely strong financial condition. We have $1.2 million in net income from our membership sales, which are going to be between 10 and 13. As Elliot commented on, we have a $2 million contingency reserve fund that we didn't have to touch this year. Our cash and investments projected for 2020 are almost $5 million, $4.8 million. And we have very little debt at Great Harbor. We have a small term loan, which is $2.2 million. And we have $2.3 million in mortgages, which, as most of you know, has been an investment in employee housing, which has served the club extraordinarily well. We were able to refinance those mortgages this year at a much lower rate, saving $60,000 in interest income. So Jeff Parker coordinated that effort and did a brilliant job. We have 9 memberships currently held in Treasury, which the club owns, which are valued at $3.6 million, which is an extra rainy day fund. And over the next 4 years, we have a long-term capital plan to reinvest back in our wonderful facilities of $3.1 million currently. And then finally, our 2019 audited financial statements, we had a clean opinion, and our accountants praised the efforts of Carrie Tilton, our wonderful CFO, for her continued work on our financials.
I'd like to give you a brief update on the Great Harbor Yacht Club Foundation. As you recall, our foundation was set up just about 1 year ago, almost to the day, and I want to thank each and every one of our members who so generously contributed to the foundation. We raised in pledges and gifts almost $1.7 million for the foundation. We were to have had our second spectacular evening this past July, which obviously did not happen. But please mark your calendars, and we hope to be able to next year have our 12-meter regatta, which all of you enjoyed, as well as a festive evening at the club and a lively auction with some spectacular items. That obviously will depend upon lots of things beyond our control, but mark it down. We're going to do our best to do something next summer. Because we couldn't have our gala, we had a virtual Foundation Day in July earlier this year, and I want to thank Karen Ketterer for her efforts in putting together a really spectacular program. You'll recall that the Foundation's mission is to make meaningful and measurable changes to the health of the harbor and its marine ecosystem. To do that, we determined, or your board determined early on, that what we needed was a series of baseline studies. And the first of those studies, a shell stock and eelgrass survey, was conducted last fall. And the principal investigator, Stephen Heck, made a presentation of the findings of the foundation, of the report, at our Foundation Day. And the results were actually pretty interesting and were well received by the town and are being used by the town for a myriad of different purposes. They're also being used and studied by other conservation groups on the island. But some of the principal takeaways were that actually things are getting better in some respects. The jetties seem to have improved the health of the eelgrass population and shellfish at the very entrance of the harbor, and surprisingly or not, because of all those oyster farms that we have up at the head of the harbor in Warwinnett, there too there's a noticeable improvement in the eelgrass growth, as well as the scallops and other shellfish. The Central Harbor remains really a problem, and it's known what is the problem. The problem essentially is runoff and other nutrients coming into the harbor from the Nantucket Harbor watershed, creating algae blooms and the like, which leads quite naturally to the Foundation's second planned project. This will be a multi-year major undertaking, and we will undertake this, the Foundation will, with the town as well as the Warner-Comet Water Company, the town's water company. So the Foundation, the town, and Warner-Comet Water will fund over a number of years a study of where exactly the nutrients are coming into the harbor, and in what degree, and importantly, what can be done to deal with the flow of that water. I think the Foundation has been generating enormous goodwill for the club with the town. Equally, or more important perhaps, I think the Foundation is actually beginning to do some seriously good work, and this upcoming study will, I think, make a major difference over time in the health of the harbor, in both its eelgrass and obviously in the scallops and the shellfish which are there. So I would urge you all to continue to support the efforts of the Foundation. We will do our best to have a real event next year, but if not, we'll do something. And again, I thank each and every one of you who have contributed so generously to the Foundation. Okay, I think we are up to the election of directors, officers and directors. If there is anyone present who would like to fill out a proxy who has not done so already, I believe there is a link where you can do so. So we'll pause a moment if there's anyone that would like to fill out a proxy, which they haven't already done so already. And tell me when and if we get more proxies. We do not have any additional proxies. The proposed slate of officers and directors, as mailed out on July 28th, has Rhonda McDonald being proposed as secretary to serve for a 2-year term, and Sue McCullum to serve as a director at large for a term of 3 years. I call for a motion to elect the slate of officers and directors as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
I vote all 128 of the proxies in hand, and accordingly the slate has been elected by majority vote. I would like to also now call for a vote on the proposed bylaw change. You'll recall that this also went out with the notice of meeting. Currently, directors at large can serve 3 consecutive terms. That's a period of 9 years, and then go on to be officers. It is proposed that we impose a 2-year limit on directors at large, and it would only be going from 3 terms to 2 consecutive terms, and thereafter again the individual in question could become a vice commodore or the rest. If there are questions or comments on the proposed bylaw change? Okay, I call for a motion to approve the bylaw change.
So moved.
Seconded.
I vote the 128 proxies in hand for the adoption of the proposed bylaw. The motion is approved. Okay, now, with every welcome, we welcome Sue McCullum to the board and Rhonda as secretary, and with real personal regret that we have to say adieu, but not really, but off the board, to my dear colleague, friend, and neighbor, Marcia Richards. Welcome. And in recognition, come. In recognition of your years on the board, 2012 to 2020, I present you with our Burgee.
Thank you, sir.
But don't go away so fast. So, Marcia is really special, and you'll forgive me because she has done so much that I'm going to have to read some of this. Tom and Marcia joined Great Harbor Yacht Club in 2003 when I guess we were still celebrating in the real boat barn. Marcia joined the social committee in 2008 and was the chair of the committee from 2010 to 2015. Being not afraid to work and doing double duty while also chairing the social committee, Marcia also was on the House Committee from 2011 to 2014. And if that was not enough, Marcia also was on the Food and Beverage Committee from 2015 to 2017. And Marcia was on the Nominating Committee from 2015 to 2020. Those are some pretty broad shoulders, and we all have much to thank for that. In addition to that, Marcia was the secretary for 3 consecutive terms from 2015 to 2020. Now, having a long list of accomplishments is no small trick, and Marcia served well in all of these. Marcia also allowed me to bend her elbow to serve yet another year on the board. I told her I would not ask her again, although I'd like to. But beyond all of the officers and committees and all the rest, Marcia is a trusted advisor, not only to myself, but to predecessor Commodores as well. If you want unvarnished, unbiased advice, you go to Marcia. There is not a person in this club that Marcia probably doesn't know. And Marcia is trusted by all, and beyond all of this, is enormously well liked by everyone she meets. And if you want a delicate task done quietly and efficiently, this is the woman that you call upon. So, for all of that, and while we don't do this every year, I'd like to award the Norwood Davis, forgive me, the Norwood Davis Commodore Award to dear friend Marcia for all you have done all these years to make this a wonderful, truly remarkable place. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's heavy. That's a heavy load. Yeah, we'll put it down here. So thanks to Marcia for that. And we'll have a drink. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Here, dear.
Appreciate it all. Thank you.
So I think we're now at, we're coming, we said an hour. I try to be prompt. We now have some time for a question or two, if there are any. Do we have a, I don't see, mine is not working. Sorry.
So there isn't one. There's one. Can you read it?
I can't read it. It's not.
Do you have your microphone back on?
Yes. Maybe somebody could read the question.
Yes, there's one question, and it says, will we consider dinners on the porch of the grill room from Labor Day to Columbus Day?
The present plan is to continue for the reasons I've indicated earlier. The present plan is to continue. We have the tent available to us until Columbus Day, and the plan has worked so far, and we plan to continue to serve both lunches and dinners in the tent, not on the deck, for the reasons we've discussed earlier. A word on what I would call the extended schedule. You'll shortly be receiving in the next day or so, in fact, I guess you saw this afternoon, that we will, in fact, the tennis and swim center will be open later than it normally is. The dates have been sent around by Megan. The Sailing Center likewise will be open for an additional 2 weeks in terms of the docks. We hope to have, the tent is available to us until Columbus Day for service, and we actually have plans for stroll as well. But the big sort of qualification, as it were, for this is we're here, or the club is here to serve its members. So all of these plans depend upon our members using the facilities. We're doing this on a tight budget, so clearly the club cannot be in a position to just burn cash and have a tent up and have nobody there. So yes, we'd be delighted if we have all of our members in the tent until Columbus Day. We would be delighted to have all of our members use our tennis facilities for an additional 2 weeks or so. We would be thrilled to have our people using our docks and our lawn service until September. The docks will actually, originally were scheduled to be pulled in mid-September. They're now scheduled to be pulled at the end of September.
Congratulations on a spectacular season for our special club.
We've received a kind remark from one of our members thanking us for our efforts. It is our pleasure to serve, and if you're happy, we're happy. Hearing no further questions, I call for a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
We are adjourned. I hope you'll join us outside for dollar buckets. Thank you very much, everyone.